Greetings, loyal subjects of the Imperium of Man. I am Librarian Elias of the Adeptus Astartes. I am creating a series of recordings with the intent of educating the general populace of the dangers of the galaxy. All of this information comes from the Lexicanum, provided to me by the Adeptus Mechanicus. I will be reading verbatim from their archives. This recording will cover one of the many foes the Imperium has, the current sovereign of the Necrons, Szarekh, the Silent King. Szarekh, also known as the Silent King, is the last ruler of the Triarch of the Necron tier and later the Necron race. Szarekh was born into the Zarakhan dynasty, which at the time tended to have its members appointed as the Silent King. At the time of his rule, the Necron tier empire was already engaged in a vicious struggle against the Old Ones. In desperation, Szarekh agreed to form an alliance with the C'tan, or Star Gods as they were called, and transfer the Necron tier into new bodies of living metal, becoming the Necrons. He was convinced into the agreement by the Deceiver and ignored the advice of his court advisor, Wargear. However, while they now lived immortal lives and were finally able to emerge victorious in the war in heaven, Szarekh realized that his people had become soulless pawns of the C'tan, and before the war even ended, was determined to exact revenge against the Star Gods. During the biotransference, Szarekh was imbued with command matrices, able to control the entire Necron race. Biding his time, Szarekh waited until the Old Ones were defeated before finally leading a Necron revolt against the C'tan, eventually defeating their former masters and shattering them into several shards. However, Szarekh saw that the new races created by the Old Ones, such as the Eldar, were now becoming dominant, and the Necrons, exhausted by aeons of war, could not stand against them. Szarekh ordered that the Necrons withdraw into their tomb worlds and slumber in the Great Sleep to reawaken 60 million years later in the future and assert their dominance over the galaxy once more. The Silent King, however, did not join his people in slumber. He destroyed the command protocols that allowed him control over the Necron race and journeyed to the void of intergalactic space, where he may find not only solace, but also penance for dooming the Necron tier race. The Silent King took to the stars in a massive, planet-sized sepulchral engine and set out for the void. With him went legions of his own Zarakhan dynasty in stasis crypts, for despite his shame, it was not befitting for the Silent King to travel without an entourage. For millions of years, the Silent King traveled in the void between galaxies. He was the only Necron to completely remember his past and time as an organic life form, suffering the memories of what he had done to his race. The eons of grief would have destroyed the minds of any lesser life form. However, he still had a plan and sought to redeem himself by achieving it on behalf of his people. Szarekh sought to have his people slumber until such a time when the enemies of the Necrons, such as the Eldar, were overcome by internal discord and the ravages of time, using their immortal bodies and radical weaponry. Szarekh would then lead his people to dominate the galaxy. In the meantime, Zarekh's exile in the void would achieve other ends knowable only to him, though some speculate this was to find a way to reverse the biotransference. However, Szarekh eventually encountered the Tyranids and saw the threat they posed to the Necron race. If the Tyranids consumed the biomass of the galaxy, the Necrons may never be able to reverse their transformation. While his duty to defeat the Tyranids was clear, he had no desire to preserve other civilizations. However, the story of Zarekh's altruism to save his people from the Tyranids has gaps, and it is unclear when exactly he witnessed the Tyranids and how exactly he chanced to encounter them in the vast intergalactic void. Moreover, it is unclear from which dynasty Szarekh eventually hailed, and few memories of his rule pre-biotransference can be recalled. Necrons who question Szarekh on these matters are taken by the Triarch Praetorians and are never seen again. In modern history, more specifically 744, Millennium 41, the Silent King ended his self-imposed exile and returned to the galaxy after an encounter with the Tyranids within the intergalactic void. He discovered the Tyranids were just one of many threats facing the Necrons. Other alien races had swarmed over their tomb worlds, and the warp now seeped across the galaxy. Szarekh has begun a journey across the galaxy with a band of his loyal Triarch Praetorians to reawaken tomb worlds that still slumber so they may unite against the Tyranids. The returned Silent King was at first careful to not reveal his true identity, even to fellow Necrons. He worked primarily through Triarch Praetorians or unwitting cryptechs and Necron overlords to achieve his goal, and has steadily influenced the galaxy from one side to the other. Slowly, he has pursued his great work from the shadows. He intends to unite the Necrons against the Tyranids while also manipulating the younger races to his own schemes. Szarekh has also claimed that he has encountered Sanguinius, who may have been on the verge of establishing an alliance with the Necrons. When the Silent King returned openly, he bid his Triarch Praetorians and other followers return to him on the tomb world of Antrak. He then chose two pharaohs of minor dynasties to form the new Triarch, consisting of Hapthatra, the Radiant, and Mesophet, the Shadowed Hand. The two pharaohs were joined into the Dais of Dominion, itself powered by a captured shard of the Catan, Yadrazatha. After joining with the platform, they began to speak with the same voice and never overruled the Silent King. In 995, Millennium 41, the Blood Angels Space Marine chapter engaged a Necron army under the Silent King in what became known as the Gehenna Campaign. When Tyranids appeared over Gehenna, the Blood Angels and Necrons of the Silent King were forced to join forces to defeat their common foe. During the Pariah Crusade, Szarekh was at first content to leave the defense of his Pariah Nexus to Illuminos Xeres and other vassal lords, but eventually intervened himself as the Imperial invasion gained size. He met his vassals and 3,000 Triarch Praetorians on the planet Zendu, being offered captured human blinks for experimentation. After this ceremony, he took personal command of a massive counteroffensive of millions of Necrons that caused several major defeats to the Imperium of Man. Like other creatures of the galaxy, Szarekh has a set of Wargear unique to himself. Szarekh was given the most sophisticated and powerful Necron body during the biotransference, and maintains a sensory and neurological network far superior to anything flesh and blood could create. His physical form is built from the necrodermis, or living metal that it is nicknamed, said to contain the physical forms of the Catan. Szarekh goes to battle atop the Dais of Dominion, a floating Necron construct that resembles a throne, which includes his fellow Triarchs Hapthatra and Mesophet residing on it. Accompanying the dais are two triarchal menhirs, floating Necron constructs that both absorb incoming fire as well as unleash devastating annihilator beams to scour nearly any foe from existence. The Silent King himself wields the Scepter of Eternal Glory, which wields the power of the Burning One Catan. Szarekh's personal warship is the massive Song of Oblivion, which is said to be the size of a city. This concludes the information regarding Szarekh. More in-depth information regarding him will be recorded at a later date. This is Librarian Elias,